Isn't that something? Hey everybody, I'm Tommy and you are on the Love Boat. You know what? Right as I'm going live, I'm trying to hit the buttons. My computer goes, hey, do you want to do an update? The timing on that was just impeccable. Timothy Glass, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hope Between the Dreams, how are you? Roberta, good to see you. Kevin Hawthorne, Lakeland, Florida. I'm glad you're here. Kristen Melinda, good to see you. Maria, glad you're here. Diane. Ms. Rose, how are you? Jesse, I guess I'll just get up from my comfy bed to get headphones. You know what? This one might be worth it. Let me take this thing off. It's been one of those days. Finding Dory, good to see you. Zero Infinity Live. What's happening? So this one, Tony Suter, good to see you. I'm glad that you're here. I want to go back on a little bit. Ann from Massachusetts, I'm glad you're here. We're going to go back a little bit to the day that Epstein died. Chickacherry Cola, love your cat. I'm going to go back to the day that Epstein died because there's some fascinating stuff. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive. Benny, could you ask a question for advice? Yeah, please stick around. You know what? Do ask a question. Renee B, good to see you. Hope Between Dreams. Rocket Queen. Oh, yeah. Hey, Amy. Sandy Wendy, good to have you here. First of all, I am not well. And it's probably good news, actually, because I think it's just my body getting rid of a lot of poison that I lived with. I mean, honestly, I do think that that's what it is. But boy, oh boy, I've had a hell of a day. My voice probably sounds a little bit deeper than normal. I've been doing a little coughing, a little hurling, but we're going to get through this one. I promise we're going to get through this one. This is interesting stuff. I've been doing a bit more deep diving. There's some interesting things that are going on from a legal standpoint. One is that Ghislaine Maxwell has an appeal going all the way up to the highest office in the land, because all of her other appeals have been shot down, right? And that's usually the way it works. And the number of people who get all the way to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court say, yes, we're going to do this, is really, really small. They don't accept a whole lot of these cases. And normally, Zero Infinity, they only accept them normally is when courts are arguing. So one of the lower courts said, yeah, this should have been overturned. And they have, arguments back and forth. It's rare that besides things like that, that they will even take up and hear a case. But this is kind of fascinating. It has been postponed already twice. Now, there could be 1,000 reasons that things are postponed, right? There really could. Scheduling problems, the fact that a bunch of people are running from the Department of Justice and quitting, could be one of the problems. Hey, Cliff Ann. But it also could be that they're working behind the scenes with her attorney, because with everybody saying, yeah, there's nothing here, there's no real client list or anything else. Well, she's in prison, right, for selling kids to somebody. We assume client lists. And there are people out there that are allegedly on these lists who have been fighting really hard to make sure that nothing comes out. Bill Gates' name comes up allegedly quite often. Days of the week, how are you? I'm doing well, thank you. There's some other names that come up regularly. And the reason that they do is because there was a little black book. It wasn't that little, but there was a black book with a lot of people that look at that. You look fantastic in green. Thank you so much. B-Lady says, yep, Miss Maxwell wants to tell Congress everything she knows about Epstein and the infamous list. That is the rumor. I don't know if that is actually true or not, but that is definitely the rumor that is going around. Lost again, how are you? There are so many possibilities that could happen with the Ghislaine Maxwell thing. The White House could be telling her, you know what, you got an appeal coming, right? A pardon coming. We're going to pardon you. We're not going to do it until such and such a date. So just sit in there, keep your mouth shut. She got a 20-year sentence and she's on the front end of it, right? She's not at the back end of this. I'm from Arkansas. Don't get me started on Bill Clinton. Yeah, people from Arkansas can usually talk a great deal about Bill. But there are other things that could be happening. Days of the week, good to see you. There are other things that could be going on. Maybe they're cutting a deal. But here's the fascinating thing. Yesterday, I put up some info about Jeffrey Epstein in the case that he had in Florida. This is the case where after he was found guilty of molesting kids, he got young ladies. He got a sentence that allowed him to do weekends. By the way, I looked into that sentence deeper. And because I told you last night, he could show up Friday night right before midnight and get credit for all day Friday. And this is standard for people who do weekends. But normally it's somebody that gets a DWI and they're trying to keep the family together and they're letting the person work because they don't want them to lose their job, yada, yada, yada. But you can show up right before midnight on Friday, get credit for serving time all day Friday. And then you could leave at 2 minutes after midnight on Sunday and get credit for all day Sunday. So you do 3 days, but you really only serve about 25 hours, 26 hours in jail. It's funnier, though, because when you research this, it also turns out that he wasn't in any kind of a general population. He was allowed to sort of do his time in an office. A lot of stuff that just doesn't happen, folks. Kind of like being allowed to leave your cell to make a private phone call when you're in the SHU. An unmonitored phone call that allegedly might have been 3 hours long, right? Really sketchy stuff with all of this, but we're going to get into more sketch. But currently behind the scenes, we've got this appeal that's coming up with Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, one of the other options is she does have this list and she's ready to dump all of it. Now, you can bury an inmate, right? You can hide an inmate so that they can't talk to the press, they can't talk to anybody. It's a very easy thing to do in the BOP because any kind of communication that you're going to talk to somebody for an interview or anything like that has to be approved by the Bureau of Prisons. So if there are people trying to reach out to her and all of that, it would be hard to know. And if they really want to bury you, they throw you in the SHU. I was actually at a prison playing cards with a guy this was at Sheridan in Oregon. And there was a guy playing cards who was wrapped up in the case having to do with the former president's son. And in the middle of a poker game, they came, got him, said, come on, you're coming with us, handcuffed him. No charge, no nothing. He wasn't in trouble. They just handcuffed him, removed him, packed up all of his stuff, and he was gone. Because they didn't want this dude talking to people. And the custody level that we were at, you were going to have an easy time making phone calls, doing things like that. He could definitely talk to people. They didn't want it to happen. So while that laptop and all that crap was going on, they grabbed this dude and just hit him. This kind of thing happens all of the time. We didn't know what that was about for weeks. But then as the news started coming out and everything, they were like, hey, that dude worked with Biden's kid. Crazy stuff. But that's not the only case that's currently going. Brock Bandy, good to see you. There are other cases. Hey, B-Lady. Plenty of other cases, actually, but one really big one. And this is the last of the lawsuits that were happening because of what happened on Little James Island. Sigrid, it's Sigrid. I don't know how to pronounce this woman's name. Last name Macaulay. Has a lawsuit going for a bunch of victims. She's suing Epstein's accountant. This is a 10-year-old lawsuit. You wrap your dome around that? They have been stalling this bad boy for a decade. And I saw her in an interview today, and it was fascinating because she said, you got no idea all of the garbage that you don't know about, right? All kinds of stuff that the world doesn't know about. For instance, in 2019, they raided the house in New York. It wasn't just the island and all that. They raided his townhouse in New York, the one that was given to him by the guy that owned Victoria's Secret. They had to cut into a safe, basically blow the door off of this thing to get inside. Inside were a crap load of diamonds, right? A bunch of gold and a bunch of passports and a stink load of thumb drives. Where are they? This lawyer made it sound like she has seen or has had access or is privy to some of that information. And maybe that's why this is a 10-year-old case, because I think they're doing everything they can to keep it out. Yeah, that is out of New York, Positive Life. This was his New York townhouse. And where is that stuff? What was on those thumb drives? And why did he have a bunch of passports? I mean, I could see having two, right? And maybe he had one with Israel. Kind of fascinating stuff in terms of his background. Researching him is almost impossible. It really is. Because he just sort of came out of nowhere, right? He was a substitute teacher. I'm going to get onto that too. But you know who Edward Barak is? He's the prime minister of Israel. He visited Jeffrey Epstein 30 times after the conviction in Florida, right? 30 times. When pressed on this, you know what his response was? I didn't realize the guy had been convicted. Are you kidding me? The former prime minister didn't know that this dude had been convicted for a sex crime. Anybody believe that? Seriously. If that sounds like BS to you, put a deuce in the chat. And the more you realize that what we're saying, what a lot of people are saying, what I believe, is that this cat was working for the Mossad, right? Well, if he was, Edward Barak visiting this guy 30 times makes a hell of a lot of sense, doesn't it? But if he wasn't, what is the former prime minister of Israel doing kicking it with this guy on 30 separate visits after already knowing he was a child molester? That doesn't smell right. And everything is going to keep coming back to the fact that this doesn't smell right. 10-year-old lawsuit against this former accountant. And when they started this lawsuit, it was because there's a lot of financial stuff. Money was going this way, money was going that way, right? It's offensive. Someone thinks anyone will believe such a thing, right? I mean, are you kidding? If I hire somebody to watch squirrel, I'm going to do a background check on him, right? And if I had been a government official, I'd be really careful who I hung out with. I would imagine, since you have the Mossad at your disposal, you might want to find out who you're hanging out with. It doesn't pass the smell test. I'll tell you what else doesn't. I went through everybody that I could today to see what other people are saying about this. And obviously the MAGA universe is divided big time and people are going nuts, right? But Ben Shapiro, I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Ben Shapiro. He's a guy that you cannot put on double speed. I put everybody on double speed, right? Because I don't have a lot of time. Barbara Wade, good to see you. So I got to put people on double speed to listen to him. Can't do that with Ben Shapiro. This guy talks fast. His response to this has been absolutely staggering. It has been suggested in the past that he's in the tank with Israel on a lot of stuff. And he says things that don't make any sense, often. Now, I don't follow the guy. I don't listen to the guy. But because he was talking about this, I want to hear everybody's take. And his take was, this happened a long time ago, right? This is no news. Besides, it's dangerous to question your government. I'm paraphrasing, but not by much. That's frightening to me, folks. That's frightening. And you say, well, why would somebody that's in the reporter game? Well, I mean, we talked yesterday about Ghislaine Maxwell's father. And he owned, right, 2 massive news corporations, which before he died, he gave to who? Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of people gave stuff to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, one guy gave him a job before Jeffrey Epstein became this wizard, right, with financial advice that made him a billionaire, right, able to buy a couple of islands and absolutely slam them, put all kinds of stuff on them, build him a little airstrip, all of that jazz, right? But before that happened, he worked as a substitute teacher. He came kind of out of nowhere. And he was hired by a guy who wrote a book called Space Relations. It's a very odd book. Space Relations was obviously a work of fiction, but it talked about this fictional government kind of out of control. And this fictional government that was kind of out of control was trafficking in minors as a way to blackmail people. Really kind of almost the Epstein story set somewhere else. That is the gentleman that gave Epstein his job working at the Dalton School. This is where he was a substitute teacher. Now, who cares? Well, he's the father of William Barr, who happened to be the attorney general when Epstein died. When Epstein was murdered, in my humble opinion, right? This is the guy whose job it would have been to investigate it. Instead, he came out with a statement that said he was horrified that they allowed this man to kill himself in custody. That doesn't pass the smell test either. And when you start seeing these dots connecting, good God, your dad was the dude that gave this guy his first gig? That smells bad again, right? This really smells bad. Johnny Scoble says, smack that like button. Please do that for me, folks. It helps. So does hitting subscribe. Makes YouTube think I'm not a hack. You know what I mean? I could help that. Actually, would really help. I appreciate that. Some of the other political commentators, right, who have been talking about this have been doing some bang up work. Some have not, but some have been doing a pretty good job. I stole today a timeline that was put together for the day that Epstein died, right? This is Candace Owen that did this work. Like her or hate her, she does amazing research, right? She really does. She does a bang up job on research. This is the timetable that she put together. On 6:33 a.m., this is the day that Epstein was found dead in his cell. 6:33 a.m., an alarm was activated in the segregated special housing unit because Epstein was discovered hanging from a noose fashioned out of bed sheets around the time a call was placed to the first responders at the correctional center, and they tried to revive him, right, with the fire department of New York. 7:10, an ambulance takes him to the closest hospital. What are the odds that there would be a reporter already at that hospital, ready to snap a couple of pictures of him. I don't think that passes the smell test. Does a reporter just park outside of hospitals and wait to see who gets taken inside? Let's get a look at these pictures. You've probably seen them before, but here's some stuff that you probably didn't hear the first time that you saw them. I certainly didn't, right? But it's one of those things that you end up having to do a little research on. But check this out. This is one of the first photos, right, that was taken of Epstein. And if you look carefully at that photo, and this is the one that most people have seen, you see some of the bruising around the ear from where the noose, sorry if this is graphic, but some of where the noose had been around the guy's neck, allegedly, right? There he is. Here's what's funny. This is the other picture, right? That is a bag valve mask, right? A bag valve mask, BVM. And it is standard equipment for first responders. This was done so that you didn't have to put your lips onto somebody doing CPR. And it's a real benefit, not just because it's a lot more pleasant, but because you get a tight seal around the nose and the mouth. Gives you a much better way to force air into somebody's lungs. You know what else it does? It covers their face. You can't see who that person is there, right? So here's the next picture. Why is that guy no longer doing the bag valve mask? Because I'll tell you what, it's going to be at least almost 20 minutes before a doctor comes in there and pronounces him dead. As an EMT, because I was one, you don't have the ability to say this person's dead. It's kind of funny, isn't it? But you can't say that. You have to be a doctor to say that. And that becomes kind of a sticky point, and I'll tell you why. Because you're not allowed to stop doing CPR on a guy until a doctor shows up and tells you he's dead. Plain and simple. I worked suicides, right? There's a word you can't say on YouTube. I worked suicides where you have to go in and hook things up to a person's finger to get a flat line on the person so that you can then say, well, look, his heart is not. I worked a suicide where the person, I'm not trying to get graphic or bum anybody out, but the person had taken his own life with a gun and had collapsed. He was in a bathroom sitting on a toilet, clothed, but sitting on a toilet. And he had collapsed over to the sink where his head, for lack of a better way to put it, had melted. Honestly, he looked like a puddle. His face looked more like a rubber mask. And they said, you need to go in there, rookie, and put things on his fingers. I said, why? Because we can't declare him dead. I said, trust and believe I can declare him dead. I don't need 28 years of medical school to tell you this guy can't be saved. But an EMT can't say someone's dead. In fact, without hooking that thing up to the fingers, and you do that in obvious cases where it's a write-off, right? But if it's not an obvious case, you got to keep doing that CPR until someone with what they call a higher patch takes over. So if you're an EMT intermediate could take over for you. If you're an EMT intermediate, a paramedic could take over for you. If you're a paramedic, and this is the fire department in New York, trust and believe that's a paramedic. But a paramedic could not be relieved by somebody other than a higher degree of medical training. So a nurse could do it, right? A nurse could do it, or a doctor could do it. Tell you what, do you see any nurses and doctors in this shot? Right? I don't. But I don't see the guy with the bag valve mask anymore on his face. Now, a cynic might say, well, if they kept the bag valve mask on there, you wouldn't have been able to see it was Epstein. Pretty funny that photographer, whose name was William Farringer, right, was able to be there right in time to take a picture when that bag valve mask was not being used. In fact, the guy that was doing the bagging, where is he? Right? Now he's gone. Gone. Here's the funny thing. How far apart do you think the timing was of these two photos? How about 8 seconds? When you take digital photos, it puts timestamps and stuff onto the, so it's permanent. There's no way to doctor that stuff up, right? It tells you when 8 seconds between this picture and that picture, which I find fascinating because in this picture, you can see a mirror. Do you see it in the bottom right-hand corner? So that would be the ambulance. And that would be these people probably heading into the hospital, right? And you can see like all of those backboards and things. When I was riding ambulance, that is the kind of thing you see when you first enter a hospital, because often they leave them there. And then when the ambulance comes back, they'll pick them up. But there's always stuff like that laying around from the last time they brought someone in. They had a backboard or whatever. 8 seconds. Now, we don't know which one of these pictures is taken first. Believe it or not, that's impossible to find out. Why? Well, because photojournalist William Farrington, he won't take calls. He doesn't want to talk about this, which is funny because, I mean, this is a pretty big photo, right? This is a career maker, isn't it? But he doesn't want to talk about it. And I tried to look him up online to see what other kind of great stuff he had done. And you can't find them. I mean, for real, for a guy that took this photo, this is like Pulitzer Prize stuff. But for a guy who took these photos, he's missing in action. But there are some stuff you can read about him, only he was using the name Roger in one of the other ones. And I didn't find anything on this cat. I really didn't. Candace Owens did, but the only thing she found was a picture of him at a pro-Israel march in New York. Can't make this crap up. Now, even if you're not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, 8 seconds between these two pictures, and for whatever reason, the EMTs stopped trying to do any CPR on this guy. I don't see a doctor, right? I don't see anybody with a higher patch than the paramedic that should be doing CPR on this guy until someone shows up and says, we'll take it from here. There's no one there taking it. But if you kept that thing on his face, it wouldn't be much of a picture. Who is that guy under that mask? Any idea? No. I'm not saying these photos are staged, but I'm not saying they're not, right? I'm sorry. It doesn't pass the smell test at all. It just doesn't. Sorry about that. It does not pass the smell test. None of this passes the smell test. Tell you something else. 3 years before anybody knew about Jeffrey Epstein, there was a reporter at ABC named Amy Roarbach, and she had done a story on him. She had found the woman that just passed away recently, Gouffre. She had found her and interviewed her, knew all about the prince, knew all about Bill Clinton, had the whole thing with a bow around it. That's the kind of thing that can make your career right there. That's a hell of a story. Why didn't we hear about it? 3 years before anybody heard this dude's name. Well, the people at ABC killed the story. Why? Well, they said because no one had ever heard of Epstein. It's just not that big a story. I guess throwing in the president and a prince didn't make this a big story. But the more you deep dive, you find out that the good people over there on the other side of the pond, right? The king and the queen kind of people, royalty, had reached out to say, you better kill that story. So did a hell of a lot of other people, apparently. They didn't want that story getting out. So it's odd that ABC broke the news of his death. That's kind of fascinating when you think that they had already killed one story on this guy, but they chose to allow the first news came out from Aaron Katersky of ABC News. Aaron Katersky, you guys know that name? He breaks a lot of stories. He broke Michael Jackson's death too. Right place, right time, I guess. Kind of like that guy that took the picture. Starts looking really bad. The more you look at this, the more it starts looking really, really bad. Now, how did we find out about Amy Roarbach from ABC News anchor? Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of Project Veritas, right? But Project Veritas caught her on a hot mic, right? Got to be careful to know if this thing right here is on. She was on a hot mic. This was not an interview. She was complaining. She said, I had that story 3 years before anybody had it. And Project Veritas caught her on a hot mic. And they broke the story of how ABC killed this. I wonder why the news in America has a 7% approval rating. Because you can't believe anything that they do. Why? Because they seem to work hand in hand with people in power in a big way. That's disturbing as hell, in my humble opinion. It really is. Hey, Cynthia. Why is only Maxwell serving time in all of this? Well, because Jeffrey Epsteined himself, or somebody killed him. So they couldn't prosecute him. And for the love of God, they had to do something, right? Here's the other crazy thing. Yesterday, I showed all of you a FBI document from when he went to court in Florida, right? When Alan Dershowitz was his attorney. And he got that sweetheart deal where he only had to do weekends. By the way, the judge in that case that gave him weekends ended up with a cabinet position in the next administration. Ain't that a, you know what? But there was a deal in place, allegedly, that made it so that she wasn't going to get prosecuted. No joke. One of the things that she is saying in the appeal is she was never supposed to be prosecuted on this. Because Epstein had made a deal with the government. And I showed you yesterday. He did make a deal with the FBI. That's why the FBI didn't pick up the case and there were no federal charges processed, right? And on top of that, there was also no forfeiture. That sweet place he had down there in Florida, they didn't take that. You molested kids in your house and they didn't seize the property? Well, that's peculiar, isn't it? That's almost a lock every time something like that happens. Hey, Jane, how are you? Maxwell came out today and said she's willing to testify to Congress. Dane, I've been hearing that, but when I tried to actually look it up and see where a lot of people are saying that, and I don't doubt it for a second, but I can't verify that. A lot of people are saying it, even some of the big news agencies, but I couldn't find any. I don't know where they're getting the info. I don't doubt it, not for a second. I don't doubt it for a second, but I couldn't find that, or I would have talked about it more. I seriously think Jeffrey Epstein may be alive, hiding away somewhere with a new ID and cosmetic surgery, etc. A lot of people think that, Jane. I think they killed him. I really don't think this is a loose cannon. It would be one thing if he got caught with this island where all of these people were going to and whatever. But you know what? It's like a drug dealer, right? This guy was using his own product. This is a guy that was a serial molester of kids. And I can't imagine that even if you run one of these operations, that's who you want running it. Now, all of a sudden, you got a loose cannon. And you got a loose cannon that the U.S. now has arrested. And he's sitting in a federal joint. I think they went in there and killed him. Now, it's just an opinion, right? It's simply an opinion. But I don't think that, again, I called this video tonight, by any means necessary. That's what is written over the training facility where the Mossad trains their new agents, right? In Yiddish, written over the door, it says, by any means necessary. Like the ends always justify the means. It's a disgusting concept. It really is. It's a disgusting concept. And I read a book by a guy that went through that. He was one of the only people to ever leave the Mossad to really sort of tell everybody how they run what they run. And the book was horrifying because they talked about how much the Israelis meddle in our government, how much they go out of their way to be very involved in messing with our country. And it has been alleged by a whole lot of people that they knew what was going to happen on 9/11, that they had info, tons of it, on what was going to happen. And it was just in their best interest to keep their mouths shut because by any means necessary, right? And if America was pissed and started a war on terror, that was in their best interest. And if that just sounds horrific, there's absolute proof that we did the same thing at Pearl Harbor, right? We wanted so badly to get into World War II that we were tipped off that was coming. Great book called Don't Know Much About History. If you've never read it, you should get it. It's absolutely incredible. It's depressing. I promise, it's depressing. But we knew that was coming. But we felt we really had to get into that war to save the planet from fascism and from Hitler. And maybe we did. But tell that to the parents of the people who were on the Arizona, right? Or any of the other people that got bombed in the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Or tell the people who lost family members on 9/11 that it was in Israel's best interest, right? The Mossad thought maybe it would be better if America didn't know about this. There's a lot of really janky stuff going on. And you know what? I'm dropping subscriber counts while I'm talking to you. Last night's show killed me. But this is the truth. This, and I'm not saying Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Mossad. A bunch of other people are, right? People who actually know, people that worked for the Mossad are saying, yeah, he absolutely was an asset with the Mossad. The guy that said it, talked about him last night. He just came out with a new book or was interviewed for a new book. He was Ghislaine Maxwell's handler. Ghislaine Maxwell's father, right, was absolutely a member of the Mossad. And he owned the Daily the Daily News in New York, and he owned the Mirror group in Great Britain, two massive news corporations. And right before he died, he gave them to Jeffrey Epstein. Any of this sound right to anybody? Huh? Tell you what, there's also, back in 2021, his black book, not the one that everybody keeps wanting, the list and all that, just a book that he had that had a bunch of people's names in it. They redacted the hell out of a lot of it, right? But it ended up on an auction block. If that doesn't make you scratch the hell out of your head, there's something wrong. But it ended up on an auction block and somebody bought it. And there are names that have come out of this. Hey, Cynthia, there are names that have come out of that book that absolutely, hey, Angie, that these people, their names appeared in that. Now, that doesn't mean that they were on that island molesting people. Doesn't mean they weren't either, right? I certainly would be more apt to be worried about them if they happened to be in a book that had this guy's, they had their names and numbers in Epstein's book. That's frightening. On that list, Mick Jagger, Courtney Love, Bill Gates, giggity, Naomi Campbell, Fidel Castro. How about that? Michael Jackson. By the way, Michael Jackson's death, do you know who broke that story? Huh? The same guy that broke the story of Epstein. Aaron Katursky. Right place, right time, huh? Guy's killing it. Killing it. Yeah, unbelievable. But who else is on there? Andrew Cuomo. Alec Baldwin had his name in that book. And oddly enough, Ethel Kennedy. Bizarre, right? But Bill Gates has been busting his hump, allegedly, to try to keep Congress from releasing anything on Epstein. Think he's doing that because he's not on a list? Doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Where are all these molested kids today? Why aren't they talking? They're suing. A lot of them right now have a lawsuit, like a class action lawsuit against the former accountant of Jeffrey Epstein. Why the accountant? Because everybody else is gone. There's nobody else left to sue. And he knew of large amounts of money that were going back and forth from people. So, but if you were one of those victims, right? Ransom has come forward. She talked, said she was raped at a minimum 3 times a day, and not always by Epstein. But she's scared crapless. She's been hiding for decades. Hiding. Look what happened to Giuffre. Now, maybe she just caught some kind of, I don't buy that. I don't know that anyone else does. She was a person who, without a doubt, said, here's a list of names of people that molested me. Straight up. There is a list of those people's names. Now, it has been determined, don't yell at me about this, but they didn't use her in the Ghislaine Maxwell case because they said that there were credibility issues. One of those was because she said that his former lawyer was one of the people that molested her. And then she had to recount that when he was able to actually produce some evidence of the only times he had ever been on that island and she wasn't there at that time, right? So I would be frightened, right? I would be frightened. I would imagine that a lot of people, right? I would imagine a lot of people don't want to end up dead. And if you can get into a federal prison, right, and whack a guy, how hard is it going to be to chase down someone that starts yelling people's names who just happened to be a girl who was on the island at that time? By the government's own words, right? We talked about it last night. There's 1,000 victims. They're not saying there weren't victims. What they're saying is they weren't victimized by anybody. They're not denying that at one time or another, about 1,000 girls moved through that island or his other properties. But over 1,000 young women were molested. 1,000 victims. What else can that mean? I mean, they're not saying, but 1,000 victims. To me, that sounds like there were 1,000 women that were molested, young ladies. But they were molested, apparently, all of them by Epstein, because there's no client list, right? And we went over last night how they worded that damn memo on the 6th. No credible this, right? Just stupid word games to justify the fact that they're not going to do anything about this. Nothing. Todd says, so here's the deal. I love that, by the way. It's one of my favorite expressions. So here's the deal. Epstein was an agent for several intelligence agencies, such as CIA, MI6, and the Mossad. Trump can't release the info because it will expose the USA in the child sex ring. That is definitely a popular theory, Todd. And you know what? It probably holds as much water as any of the other ones. However, I think it's more likely, just my opinion, that once you get all of those names in your paws, you start to think, good God, do you have any idea the power that I could wield with these names? And then things like the saying there was never going to be a tax anymore on anyone's tips. Tips will never be taxed again. That was passed unanimously. I can't think of that many things ever that have been passed unanimously, especially when the guy in the White House is unanimously hated by one party, right? Across the board. Normally, if the Republicans vote for something, the Democrats don't because they hate Trump. But they haven't had a problem pushing some things through since the 6th of July, when the memo came out saying, we're not gonna, there's nothing here, nothing to see here, folks, right? Nothing to see here. Now, I could be wrong, right? Wouldn't be the first time. But my humble opinion is that once they got this in their hands and saw all of the people, that it made more sense to them to use this as a way to push any platform they want, because they can force politicians, they can force very powerful people, right? Very famous people, very filthy rich people to do whatever they want. And if you've got 5 or 6 billionaires on that list, right? Those people probably carry a little bit more sway than someone like me. We all, right? I mean, everybody that I have spoken to, everything that you watch says Bill Gates is busting his hump to make sure that that list doesn't get out. Bill Gates, he's got some cash. And it seems to me, Ghislaine Maxwell is doing just 7.3 days per the 1,000 victims. Interesting. Timothy Glass, interesting. And 10,000 videos. Now, they're not coming clean with what those videos are. They said that they all have children on them. Now, that could mean that he was downloading stuff off of the internet. I kind of doubt that. I tend to believe that this is the stuff that he was getting from the victims, which would mean that each of these kids were victimized on film at least 10 times, right? Now, if Epstein did all of those, I talked about this last night. If he did one a day, that's 27 years. He was not living on that island. He was there, right? But he spent time in France. He flew all over the world. This guy was a jet-setting piece of shit. Pardon me. Bill Gates' wife left his butt for it. Yeah, a lot to that. 10,000 videos of children on the island. We don't know that, B-Lady. We don't know that because they're not giving us a shred of transparency. None, right? None. And there's got to be a reason for that, right? It's interesting to me that right now we've got a lot of people that are tripping, including they are doing currently, you're going to love this, the New York Times, according to the New York Times, the FBI is using polygraph tests on all of their agents, right? And this is standard operating procedure, by the way, if you're an FBI agent. They want to make sure you're not stealing. They want to make sure you're not on the take, that people are bribing you. But that's not what they're doing with the polygraph this time. One of the questions, according to the New York Times, have you ever cast aspersions on Mr. Patel himself, the director, right? That sounds like J. Edgar Hoover stuff, doesn't it? But allegedly, according to the New York Times, they're polygraphing their employees to check for loyalty. That doesn't sound like the United States of America, at least not the way that I grew up, right? Schoolhouse Rock and all the cool stuff when we used to study the, civics and things. That's not the country that they told us about growing up. But whether my friend is correct, right? And the Trump doesn't want the USA involved. They don't want egg on the face of America. You know why else I have a struggle with that? Because if you look during the time period that this was going on, the guy that would have the most egg on his face would be Clinton, right? And we live in such unbelievable political times. As I said yesterday, they didn't build the wall, right? Because Trump was a racist. But all of the people calling him a racist had voted to build the wall when Barack Obama wanted to build it, right? And at that point, most of the Republicans didn't want to because nobody wants to give the other party a win. So they let 300 people a day die by any means necessary, right? It sounds to me like the United States has adopted the same mantra as the Mossad. The ends justify the means. Blackmailed by whom? Well, I believe that the Mossad ran this operation. That's my opinion, right? Now, our friend says he thinks MI6 was in on it as well. Wouldn't be surprised. He also thinks the CIA was in on it. If you told me that the CIA sacrificed babies at midnight, I would not be surprised. I've done tons of shows on the CIA vis-a-vis the drug problems in this country. The first time heroin was a problem, we were in Vietnam. When the crack epidemic happened, we were down in South America, here in South America, I should say, now that I live here in South America, right? And I did time on the same yard as Freeway Ricky Ross, the guy that was selling all of that crack. And he will tell you that he was getting the blow from the CIA. So wherever we end up, then we go to Afghanistan, boom, the crack habit's gone, and there you go, right? Nice, Todd. Nice. We go to Afghanistan, and they got more opium and poppy fields than any other place on earth, right? Any other place on earth. Why? All of a sudden, does America have the worst heroin problem that we had ever had? Well, my humble opinion, and Todd might back me up on this, he might not, but my humble opinion is this. When I was looking into this, the number used to be 50 million. With how insane it's gotten in the last couple of years, my gut would say it's a lot more than that now. But it used to be, if you wanted more than $50 million for anything, you have to go to Congress and ask them for it. And the CIA likes to do things without having to go to Congress and asking them for the money. So if you can move a couple of $1 billion worth of tar heroin onto the streets of our country, if you lose a couple of hundred people a day, they're junkies anyway, right? They're piece of crap junkies. Who cares? We're just thinning out the herd. If you look at the Sacklers, right? Everybody that worked for the Sackler family at one time or another worked for the FDA, right? The Food and Drug Administration, they went back and forth. The incest between working for the Sacklers or working for the FDA was absolutely insane. Why is it that Congress allows the United States of America to advertise drugs on television? If you think that that's pro forma and that every country in the world does it, no, just here in New Zealand, right? The United States and New Zealand are the only countries that allow that. Why? Well, because people are paying massive amounts of money to politicians to allow that to continue. When we were kids, we would go to the doctor and we would say, I don't feel good. It's weird. I lay in bed, my legs do this at night. I'm really kind of struggling, right? And they would go, oh, there's a drug called Lyrica, right? Pregabalin. And this may give you some relief from that restless leg syndrome. Now you walk in and go, hey, I want a prescription for that pregabalin stuff. The Pentagon is missing $2.46 trillion according to its own latest release of info. And you know what? I would have to cry BS. Not that I believe everything you're just saying, but I don't believe what they're saying. I mean, we just did what? The first audit ever? Because they had never audited the Pentagon before. And if you've never done an audit until just now, how much do you think fell through the cracks? Seriously. And the second largest budget in the United States of America is the war on drugs, and we haven't got a win to show for it. Lumen, good to see you. Not an win, not one, right? We spend more money on the war on drugs than anything else in America other than defense, right? And the number one cause of death in our country is drug overdose. We're killing it. So you say to yourself, well, why do they keep doing it? If it doesn't damn work, why do we keep doing it? And the answer is, in my opinion, that the war isn't winnable, but it's fundable, right? They can fund the hell out of it. And all of these little people and all of their little fiefdoms don't want to give up the amount of money that they keep getting every year. Strange policy, too. Let's say your little part of that fiefdom gets a $2 million a year budget. And at the end of the year, you got $300,000 left in your budget. You would think the government would high five you. But what they do instead is they give you $2 million the next year. But if you spend every penny of it, they bump it up by 15%. So when I was in federal prison, I worked in a kitchen in FCI Terre Haute. And my job was ordering stuff from people, right? I used to be as an inmate, I used to do the ordering for everything in there because that's usually how it works. So what was insane was the fiscal year for the government ends in September. At least it does for the Bureau of Prisons, Department of Justice. So every August, they would go and look in the books and say, we got 300 grand we got to spend in a month. So while I was there, we were buying a box of Pop-Tarts, right, name brand, and giving one to every single inmate that came through for breakfast every day for 2 weeks to help burn money. They were also taking all of the ovens that were in the kitchen, which were 2 years old. These are industrial ovens. These are the kind of ovens you build for a prison, not for like a kitchen for a big restaurant. These are prison stuff, indestructible, right? 30 or 40 years you should get out of one of these puppies. But they're replacing them every couple of years. And of course, some relative of somebody that works there goes and buys them at the auction. But they're getting rid of everything, throwing out everything, and buying all new crap because they got to get that budget gone so they can get a 15% kick the following year, right? Fund me. And that's everything throughout the entire country, which sucks, right? But I'll tell you what, piss that money down the toilet. I don't care. Light it on fire. But But when the ends justify the means to the point where by any means necessary, you're cool with 13, 14, 15, and 16-year-old girls being pimped out to politicians and rich people, right? So that you can get all of the stuff you want either passed or done or blackmailed. Well, then we've lost our way. And if there was more than one government in it, then boy, oh boy, we need a global civil war. How effed up a planet are we where this is a cool thing? And I find it kind of odd that Bill Barr's dad wrote a book about this, right? And then coincidentally gives a job to Jeffrey Epstein. First time we can, by the way, no lie, try researching that puppy. The first time you will find any information on him, anything, is that first job given to him by Bill Barr's dad. So it's not a shocker that when he ended up dead, Bill Barr didn't want to have anything to do with it. He came out and just said, yep, suicide. Boy, we blew that one. I feel real bad about it, though. Really feel bad about it. I don't buy it. I don't think anybody does. The FBI director, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino are livid. This is a tweet. You don't call them that anymore? Whatever it is. Used to be a tweet. This was a leak. They are livid with AG Pam Bondi over her Department of Justice memo and the lack of transparency from her office regarding the Jeffrey Epstein files. Sources tell me Dan Bongino is taking the day off from his job as deputy director of the FBI, and there's now speculation on whether or not he will return to his job at the FBI over his disgust with Bondi's lack of transparency and the handling of the Epstein files. Pam Bondi, I think she's got a real good chance of being a sacrificial lamb, right? Because the numbers are tanking. And the people in America are going, hell no, hell no. You came out waving around those thick books saying, this is it, right? Here it is. We got it. This is phase one of the Epstein stuff. Oops. Nothing there. God, we were wrong, huh? Damn, egg on our face. Here we thought that Ghislaine Maxwell was actually selling these kids for sex to politicians and to rich people. And in spite of the fact that Bill Gates and Mick Jagger and Courtney Love and Naomi Campbell and Fidel Castro and Michael Jackson and Andrew Cuomo and Alec Baldwin and Ethel Kennedy all had their names in this guy's book. Coincidence. They're literally saying he just collected this stuff for clout. No one can believe that stuff. You can't. I mean, there's nobody on planet Earth that dumb. Pop-Tarts and Twinkies for breakfast of champions. No question, Kellyanne. No question. Dory Angel says, I hope Ghislaine makes it to August. I'll tell you what, I think she might be the safest person. Honestly, I'm not joking. I think there are a lot of other people that could end up getting whacked. I'm not kidding. Right? There are, I think there's more threats to people like Tucker Carlson than you're going to find, because that would really sink the ship. If this woman kills herself, honestly, I mean, I just don't think that anybody would believe it. I bet you that the Bureau of Prison is guarding her ass, right? God, don't let her have anything that she could hurt herself with. The distraction while I'm watching the infrastructure being built around us, and they are so blatant. Yeah, it's kind of terrifying. It's kind of terrifying. And the question becomes, I mean, are we that beholden to, you know, does the Mossad have so much dirt on us that they can turn the screws and get whatever they want done? I don't know. It's an interesting question, isn't it? Especially when Trump was talking about sitting down at the table with Iran, right? There was going to be negotiations. They were literally talking about sitting down at the table with Iran to talk about the nuclear program and talk about all that stuff. And then boom, Israel decides that they're going to go in and bomb the hell out of them. That didn't seem like it was Trump's plan at all. And then Bibi Netanyahu sells them on this concept that, hey, it's going to be a lot easier to get them to the table if they're scared. Because you know what? That's really been Iran's MO, hasn't it? It's really easy to scare those people to the table. Religious fanatics, you know, aren't the people to scare to the table. For real. Do you think that they're building nukes because they think they can take over the world? They're building nukes because they believe that there is an imam, right, that's living in a well that's going to show up, but they got to usher that in. I mean, if you start, you're literally talking about people you're not going to be doing a hell of a lot of negotiating with, and you sure as hell aren't going to scare them to the table. Why does Trump keep giving money? Well, That's really the question, isn't it? That's why you set up things like a honeypot operation, so that you can try to get as many politicians from a country as you possibly can to have sex with kids on tape, right? Then you can actually start to put the screws to a country. You don't necessarily have to have anybody at the top. You just have to have enough people that you can go in there, and when they say we're talking about $25 billion more aid to Israel for their defenses, there's not a politician that's it's going to be very hard to get that to not pass if you've got 30 or 40 people that are just stone cold dirty, right? And if you've got rich, what do you call them? I guess we don't call them oligarchs over here, do we? Just call them billionaires. I like the term oligarch better, right? Because honestly, if you get that, one of the things that scares the hell out of me is the fact that people this rich are that susceptible, right? For real. What do you give somebody that has everything? I don't know, maybe the fantasy of getting the girl in high school that he didn't get. Seriously. I mean, what makes a politician have sex with a kid? Because that's really what it's looking like, right? Like there was a lot of people in power that were doing this jacked up stuff. But the saddest part is there isn't going to be justice for any of these people. The victims are just going to be victims. Now, something's going to have to happen, right? Because they're in a downward spiral right now in a way that no one has ever seen. For real. Like the MAGA people, like him or hate him, they're viciously pro-Trump, right? Like they are, it's almost a religion with them, and they're pissed. He's lost the base, and his numbers are dropping, right, at a rate that's terrifying. He's going to have to do something. And I think that probably Pam Bondi is going to end up a sacrificial lamb. And I've got news for you. There's nothing that you could do to make this go away except release all of the info. I don't think the American people are going to take anything else. If you said, hey, guess what? We got a stimulus package. We're going to give $100,000 to every American. They'd be stoked. But when that 100 grand was done, they'd go, what about that Epstein list? That's the problem with promising something through an entire campaign and then not delivering on it. And you know what? People will say to me, come on, Tommy, that's what politicians do forever. They say, we're going to withdraw from Afghanistan. Then they don't. We're not going to, we're going to pull the troops out of here. Then they don't. They make all of these promises. That's my theory has always been, because when you get into the presidency, you show up in office, they walk in and go, you don't think you really run anything, do you? We'll let you pick one or two of those things that you can run through, but we're going to tell you exactly how this runs. And should that be a shocker? America's terrified that the dollar is not going to be the world currency anymore. You realize that when we talk about barrels of oil and we talk about all of these things that are traded on the world market, they're not traded in yen, they're traded in US dollars. And the whole world was talking for the entire time that Biden was in office about kicking the dollar off as the standard. And they probably should, right? What backs it? Just the fact that we say it's a dollar. And I spend it here. We spend it in Ecuador. But there's nothing backing it. We all know that it's a fiat currency. If you study fiat currencies, the average fiat currency doesn't make 30 years. You know how long we've been off the gold standard in this country, in your country, whatever, my old country. So I think a lot of this, these are power plays to try to do things like saving the dollar as the world currency, because without that, America really loses a lot of the Trump card, no pun intended, that it's had forever. I remember when the Little Rock police performed a no-knock warrant and shot a man in his house on suspicion of gun smuggling. That man was director of ops at the Bill and Hillary National Airport. Shocker. Man, they just raided a guy's house to take his squirrel, because you can't have a squirrel, right? They ended up killing the squirrel. Lovely. Boy. But we can't do anything to save or to bring justice to 1,000 girls, right? They're women now. Scars that $1 million a piece, $2 million a piece ain't going to cure, right? It just isn't. And the one woman who really did say, not having it, right, came out and told the entire world. In fact, she told the world 3 years before anybody heard about it, because ABC buried that, right? The palace wasn't going to allow that to take place. Do you think Maxwell was blackmailed to not give names? I think Maxwell was terrified. And the other thing is, she is, in my opinion, dyed in the wool, right? She's a Mossad agent by any means necessary, which means if she's got to do 20 years to protect that country, she will. That's my humble opinion. I think she kept her mouth shut. A lot of people said, yeah, she was afraid she was going to get killed. No, I just don't think it's a big club and you ain't in it. George Carlin. Love Carlin, Todd. Great reference. Love George Carlin. Rhonda, good to see you. Trump is too busy threatening Rosie O'Donnell. Cynthia. Don't worry, he'll sell his daughter-in-law, Laura, and other family members to try to save what he said and done. You know what? I am sad to say that there's probably a lot of truth to that. And I voted for the cat. I did. I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't think you can spend money you don't have. They don't let me do it, right? So smaller government to me makes sense. I don't want people looking in my bedroom to see who I'm having sex with. I don't want any of the crap, right? I really like the idea of a smaller government, not a bigger government, which means I almost always voted for smaller government, which meant that direction. Boy, and I don't want to bum anybody out with this, but you know how stoked I am that I don't have to vote in the next election? Honestly. Because there's no winning anymore. There isn't, right? Right wing, left wing, still the same plane. I don't believe anymore that there's a lot of difference. Audra in Denver, hope you're doing all right. I was thinking of you yesterday. I think a lot of people are grieving, Dory. I think a lot of people are grieving big time. I don't think, I think Ghislaine Maxwell is biding her time. I don't think there's a chance on God's green earth she's going to do 20 years in there. I don't know whether or not she gets pardoned or how it goes down, but there's definitely, I don't think that there's a chance that she's going to end up doing all of that time. And I think that if the Mossad could have gotten to her, they might have whacked her. I think the Mossad was terrified because, you know, people say, do you think Epstein got a new face and all that? No, I think that they were really worried that this dude couldn't do time. I think they were really worried that this guy was going to go, screw this, dude. I'm not going to federal prison as a child molester. Look, I've done time, folks. Those guys don't get treated real well, right? As a rule of thumb, they really don't. Do I remember Gary Glitter? Yes, I do. One of the world's most infamous pedophiles. UK rocker, glam rocker, caught International Inc. Thailand. He was Clive Epstein Diddy. We as a society need to check ourselves because this should not be. Yeah, it's a great comment. It's a great comment because it's been going on for a really long time. And you know what? Before Gary Glitter, you had that other dude. In fact, I believe he was knighted. The comic, always had a cigar in his mouth. Somebody help me. I got some people here that know. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. But always had a cigar in his mouth, blonde hair, one of the worst pedophiles in history. And he got knighted. And no justice at all. Died a happy old man. None of the stories really came out until after he was dead. Jimmy Seville, thank you very much. Nora, well done. Jesse, thank you. Yeah, Jimmy Seville. Just horrific. And it's one of those things that after a Gary Glitter or after a Seville, you go, hey, right? Maybe we can stop this. But you get to the point where you just don't feel like that's ever going to happen. James Comey's daughter, you're absolutely right, was the prosecutor for Epstein, Maxwell, and Diddy. Her job was to get the least amount of charges possible. I think there's probably something to that. I really do. I also think that Ghislaine Maxwell's case has been put off twice. I'd be really shocked if that wasn't because they weren't talking to her big time. Big time, right? I think that this is a person who is of great interest to the United States and, right? I mean, just let's be cynical for a minute. Can we? Can you allow me to just be a cynic and a conspiracy theorist kind of a mindset for a second? How much good could she do right now for the MAGA universe? If you were to get people to really talk to her, right, in advance and have her pop up in Congress and say whatever the hell they want her to say, not the truth, but whatever they want her to say to make this go away, that would be worth a hell of a lot. Probably terminating the remainder of her sentence. And you know what? They should. Because as I was saying, remember the case I showed you yesterday? And I showed you that thing where the FBI said there will not be any federal stuff against him. And there won't be that file. That's what they released. The rest of it is completely redacted. I showed you what isn't redacted. Somewhere in that section that's all blacked out with marker, it said, and you're not going to prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell. True story. Her attorney, The stance of her attorney is she never should have gone to court anyway. There was already a deal with Epstein to make sure this didn't happen. Far be it from a country like the United States of America to cut a deal with somebody and then pull the rug out from underneath them as soon as the person dies, right? As soon as Epstein dies, to just go, well, sorry, Ghislaine, I know that Epstein cut a deal for you, but he's gone. So now you're getting prosecuted. I mean, it sounds really bad, right? But I'm afraid that that's probably what happened. Her attorney definitely says she should never have been in there. There was a deal cut so that didn't happen. And we just didn't pay off. We said we would, and then we didn't. Shocker. But I don't see her doing 20 years. I really don't. The conspiracy theorist hat is what keeps smart, crazy people alive. Yeah, most of the time. I'll tell you what, though. You do a little deep diving on conspiracy theorists, the guys that really are good at it, and a lot of them die some really bizarre deaths. You know, like their car just randomly starts to go 150 miles an hour and slams into a bridge abutment. That's an odd way to commit suicide, right? There are a lot of ways that people who really out stuff like this tend to go away. Truthfully. And, you know, what would a country do, right, to protect itself if it's already cool with allowing 1,000 girls barely into puberty to be molested by adults as part of an operation? Because at that point, there's no soul left. What's worse than that? Seriously, sacrificing babies? There's not much worse than being okay with this because it justifies that. If that's okay, what isn't? Anne Hesh was going to do a documentary on Hollywood pedophilia, and don't look that up. I did a deep dive on that. Don't look that up. It's one of the most disturbing clips of film I've ever seen. Jerry Lee Lewis, Charlie Chaplin, Errol Flynn, Steven Tyler, and Ted Nugent all loved little girls. Well, I think a lot more than that, but yeah, all of them did. And, you know, Tyler didn't do any time. We know there's so many. We don't have royalty in the United States, right? Great Britain does. And we saw Great Britain come down on ABC and literally stop a story that could have protected a lot more victims. What the hell was Edward Barak visiting Epstein 30 times after he had already been convicted of pedophilia? If Epstein didn't work for the Mossad, why was a former prime minister kicking it with him? That's not a visit. That's not, hey, I was in, we bumped into one another. 30 visits? You know how many great friends I have? I haven't seen 30 times in the last 3 decades. 30 visits after he had already been convicted. And his response was, I didn't know he'd been convicted. Yeah, you probably didn't have the ability to research it. You know what I mean? That kind of job makes it hard to research things. Did me and one other person discussing to commit a crime? I'll tell you what, it's crazy, Daniel. I actually went to prison for conspiracy to commit bank robbery. I did not go to prison for bank robbery. That's what I pled guilty to, conspiracy to commit bank robbery. On a bank I didn't rob. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not a bank robber, but I didn't rob the bank. I pled guilty to conspiring to rob. Somebody else did. And they got that person to say I was partnered up with them. They nothing but his word, right? There was no evidence, nothing. I was never in the bank. There was none of that. But they have a way of getting you to sit down in a room and say to you, now, if you plead guilty to this, we'll give you a deal that we can't charge you for any banks you might have done in the last 15 years. You know how fast you plead to that? Even though it's not a bank you ever robbed, that's a hell of a deal. Yep. Sorry. Isn't that snitching implicating someone else in your crime? Absolutely. The guy that did that, absolutely, he was a snitch. Absolutely. Absolutely. But this happens all the time. All the time. I promise you. The feds will go in there. Here's the thing. I knew the dude, and that was about all it took. You get a guy in there and they say to him, hey, do you happen to know this Scoville cat? Yeah. You happen to know how he gets his cash? No. But I promise you, if you tell me, I'll testify to it. Right? And honestly, I got a pretty good deal, all things considering. I could have done a hell of a lot more time. I really could have. I could have done a hell of a lot more time. Sad, right? Love the movie Conspiracy Theory. Turned out the crazy guy was the one knowing the truth. You know what's crazy about that film too? Do you remember the scene where the woman says to him, "Are you a big Holden Caulfield fan?" She's making reference to the book Catcher in the Rye, and he goes, "I've never read it." And she's like, "Well, you got 25 copies of it here in your closet." And he's like, "Yeah, there's like 50 of them under the bed." It's a great conspiracy theory over the years because there were people who, like the guy that shot John Lennon, was literally following one of the chapters from that book. And there has been the Manchurian candidate theory that when these guys go, bat crap crazy and they're programmed to be a hitman or an assassin or whatever, when they start getting off track, they train them to go in and buy a copy of that book. It's weird too. Like I collect Alice in Wonderland books. You got any idea how many different publishers make Alice in Wonderland books? Someday look up the how many people have published the Catcher in the Rye. Completely a different scenario. It's very odd, but that is a hell of a movie, Todd. It really is. And it's one that you should see about 9 times because the more times you see it, the more it actually makes sense and the more you pull out of it. Just us victims of unjust laws. Justice. Timothy Glass. I like that. I've never heard that. How did I do 13 years in the feds and not hear that? It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. Yeah, it's depressing to find yourself in the position that we're all in right now. It really is, because you grow up and you're taught that, and I know it's propaganda and it's whatever, but good night, V-Bombs. Thank you for spending time with us. Appreciate you. Keep New York safe. You find yourself believing that we don't do stuff like this. Other countries do stuff like this, right? We would never cover up something like this. We're not like that. We're better than that, right? We're that shining light on the hill. Isn't that what Reagan called us? We're that shining light on the hill. And when you find out that you're not, or if you start to believe that you're not, it hurts, right? Tommy, any reason why young models can walk a runway with see-through garments that if you wore in public, be charged with indecent exposure? Well, I'll tell you what, if I had a theory on that, as sad as this is, I would ask Naomi Campbell. For real. She just keeps showing up everywhere where she shouldn't, doesn't she? I mean, I don't know how that woman, there's something really wrong with some of the people whose names were in this cat's book. I think that there's a lot of people that in that industry, it's just a horrific industry. The what was the name of that company? Starts with a B. I can't think of it. But they were doing photo shoots of kids wearing S&M gear. Bantanega, somebody help me. Somebody who's smart help me with that. Fashion is art on the runways. Yeah, you know what fashion is to me? It's a way to turn young women anorexic or make them believe that they're supposed to look like those people walking around. I have a daughter. There you go. Thank you very much. I have a daughter. And I never noticed any of it prior to having a daughter. But the number of times that you see a airbrushed woman, right? There are so many people now who go, I think I was born in the wrong body. Well, I'm not shocked, right? Nobody should be, because they're looking at images of people that aren't even real, right? They shave off the hips, they change colors, they make the breasts bigger, they augment the hell out of these people. You're looking at images that aren't even real. So you get people who look in the mirror and go, I don't look like a girl. Yeah, well, give it 10 years. Nah, just get on hormone replacement therapy and, right? Just lost another 50 with that. You can't even talk about this stuff without really bumming people out. And you know what? You also can't talk about stuff without the big red button demonetizing it. But I'm not going to call rape grape. Grapes are fantastic. I'm not doing any of these stupid things that everybody does anymore, ever. I'm not. Jeffrey Epstein, suicide, that's the word I'm using. That's what it is. Demonetize me. I refuse to censor my speech. Cost me a little bit of money, whatever. I feel dirty when I do. I swear to God, I do. There's something about saying grape. Grape. There's nothing foul about that. It's not what happened to those girls. Those girls were raped. It's a terrible word, right? And it should never get softened. in any way. It's a terrible word, but it's what happened to them. Maybe it's the fact that we say stuff like grape or essay, and we literally can't say what happened to them. Maybe that's why this crap can continue. Maybe there's more people that have to say rape, right? Maybe there's more people that have to admit that this stuff is going on in the world and do it in a way that does not dumb it down, right? There's no such thing as a minor attracted person. They're pedophiles, right? But nobody likes that word. You know the new one? Zoophile. Have you heard this? Because bestiality is a bad word. And the people who find themselves in love with animals, well, they're born different. Man, oh man. Trust and believe it's bestiality, right? Another Carlin reference. Add more syllables to that bad boy, and it just doesn't sound all that nasty anymore, right? From shell-shocked, which you knew exactly what that meant, right? To battle fatigue syndrome. And they just keep adding more syllables. The more syllables you add, the less it sounds bad. Don't let them play with the vocabulary. Honestly, don't let them tell you what you can say, what you can not say. And I did it. I said grape. I said all of these things, right? Most of the time on this channel, if you've never been here before, I talk about addiction. That's what I usually talk about. If I put the word addiction in my thumbnail, it's done. It will be demonetized. Before I say one word, if I put the word addiction in it, I'm done. Hey, thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate that. But I can't say cocaine. I can't say heroin. How do you run a sobriety channel without saying cocaine or heroin? I got to call it Bolivian marching powder. And then people giggle. And you know what? It's not funny. It's a rugged substance. It enslaves people, right? If I start talking about all of the people that overdosed on dope, 300 people a day dying, the big red button doesn't want you to talk about that out loud. Why not? Holy hell, if there's anything we ought to be talking about, that's it. The only thing worse, I promise you. Look, I feel for junkies. I am one. I feel for all of those people. But you know what? I made a choice to stick a needle in my arm the first time. I did. And I was born with that predisposition to be an addict, but I made the choice to do that. None of those girls chose to be raped. And if our country doesn't do something for those women, they're not going to do anything for anyone. For real. You know what? Talk about this. Please talk about this. Because they're going to do everything. Sarah and I really do appreciate you. Because they're going to do everything they can to bury this crap. They are. You know, the president, the guy that ran on this. They asked him about Bill Clinton. He said, nice guy. Like the guy. But I think he's going to be in some trouble for the stuff that went on that island. Apparently not anymore. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and the drugs on the street these days are heavily compromised. They are across the board compromised. They are. When they seize cocaine at the Arizona border, it has fentanyl in it. Now, if you've done drugs, that makes zero sense, right? Why would you put fentanyl into cocaine? You're selling a speedball in advance? No, because if you just put just enough of it in it, you get the euphoria, and you're going to make somebody addicted, and they're going to continue to buy the powder. And more importantly, you can then kill them. Because I promise you, it's chemical warfare. It's not an accident that the two countries with the biggest fentanyl problem on planet Earth are the United States of America and Israel. Odd, right? Because Israel doesn't have the Mexican border right below them. They're doing what they can to get at us without getting at us. It's frightening. And every time you talk about it, they throw a switch so that your video doesn't get seen. That's censorship. It's ugly. On the bright side, I don't care. How's that? I don't. Fashion is a ridiculous waste of money, in my opinion. I agree with you, Stephanie. And what's worse, most of the fentanyl comes to the USA from China. Almost all of it. Now India has gotten in on it because it's worth so much money. We have such a fentanyl problem that there are other countries that are manufacturing it. And every once in a while, North Korea apparently will get a load over here as well. But yeah, almost every bit of it comes from China. And you know what I find funny? That we passed a bill back in the day that said that they couldn't ship fentanyl to the United States. By the way, I bought that crap after that law was passed, had it shipped to the United States, bought fake cocaine too. But why would you pass a law that says you can't ship this stuff and not say, or any of its precursors? You want me to believe that we weren't smart enough to say, boy, don't send any of the ingredients over there either, right? But we didn't. We allowed it to continue. And it makes you wonder if we're thinning the herd. It makes you wonder if it's not an agenda of somebody like Bill Gates, right? He's open and honest about the fact that we need to knock about, knock the planet down by about half. I'm sorry, what? You want to hear something crazy? It's a gospel truth. If you gave everybody on planet Earth 6 feet of space, right? Their own 6 feet, you could put them in Rhode Island. Ever fly from the United States to California? I have. As a public speaker, I used to take the Greyhound. I mean, the Greyhound, the red eye. I would take the late flight all the time, going from the east to the west coast. And you will see lights about 4 times the entire flight. The rest of the time, it's pitch black. You get a real appreciation for how much land we're not using, right? Yeah. Fashion is definitely stupid. Style is the way to go. $5 tops and bottoms is everything. Georgia Guidestones, blown up. That's right. Wanted to reduce the world population to 500 million. I didn't realize it was that bad. I did know that they blew them up. And they got it on film, right? Little car pulled up, boom, gone. Very odd. Tommy, do you think chance that prostitution will be legalized, regulated in our lifetime? I'm starting to doubt it. It is where I am right now. It has been legalized and regulated in Ecuador since 1912 or something like that. I don't think you will see it in the United States. I don't. And it's another one of those laws that doesn't make any sense to me. The reason that the victimhood of that is because it is illegal, right? It's because the John that beats the crap out of a girl, that girl's not going to call the cops because she was breaking the law in the first place, right? When it's regulated, you don't have the same victimhood. Now, people argue with me about this one all the time. I don't know happy hookers because I was a drug addict. So the ones that I met were all selling themselves to get dope. So I never met the girl that was happy to sell her body. I never met that. That it may exist, and maybe in legalized places, maybe that's a real thing. I don't know. It's not something that I was a thief. That's how I got my dope, right? I became a thief and then a bank robber, and then it escalates. But if I was a woman, I would have ended up a prostitute. I guarantee you. They're trying to control the population worldwide. I think COVID was designed to achieve that goal. I believe that as well. I absolutely believe that as well. Laws are supposed to keep us happy. You would think. You would think. But it seems to me that they're very happy to allow 300 people a day to die in America from drug overdoses. Although, sad, right? But, whatever's going on with the current administration, they turned the tap off on that. There's a lot less dope coming across the border, a ton less. Now, it's not always a great thing either. I mean, it's terrifying. It really is. But if you turn the spigot off on that, you end up with situations like the crocodile situation. Because people don't do that dope to get high. If you believe they do, you've never been a junkie. Right? That dope just takes away. It takes away pain. It takes away misery. It takes away childhood trauma. It's sad because they glamorize it in movies and things like that, and there's nothing glamorous about drug use. It's disgusting. It really is. And I'm not talking about people smoking weed or but the heavy stuff, the stuff that's killing people currently, and it is killing people, and it's in everything. And each time you would think, if you were a dope dealer and you were shipping stuff into a country and you found out that your dope was killing people, you would put less dope in the pill that you're pressing, right? But they don't. They're literally making it stronger each time. You can look this up. Every time they catch a big load, it's a little bit stronger than the previous one. It doesn't make any sense. None, right? What business is it logical to kill your customer base? Makes no sense, especially because that particular drug is not like other drugs. The people that do it have to buy it 365 days a year. There's no option. Normally, 2 or 3 times a day. Killing that person doesn't make any sense. None. Yet they keep upping the strength of it. That means, unless you're just adult, it means that they're not bringing that in here to get people high. They're bringing that in here to kill men, right, of military age. And at the same time, they were sending people across your border who were men of military age from all other countries. For real. Look at the statistics of the people that were coming across that border. Military age men. And the dope that's coming across the border in their backpacks are killing, number one cause of death of men from 18 to 55. Now, women die too, but the vast majority are white dudes. For real. Way more white guys in that age group die than any others. It's if you ever had to call up everybody and say, hey, man, they're coming to the shores, we got a lot less people to fight than we ever had before. It's true. And the ones that are here, a lot of them are so strung out that we're in really, really bad shape. They couldn't fight if they had to. Clintons will never go down. That's very obvious. If you've seen their hit list, example, someone shoots himself in the head twice, suicide. Yeah, you know what? I read a report once, and they just said if you are of the age of boom, right, 55, whatever the age was at the time, the average 55-year-old has this many associates of them that have died, right? Of either drug overdoses, suicides, whatever. The Clintons were like 8 to 10 times what the normal average was. Yeah, I'm terrified of that family. But you know what? There was a time where I would have beat the drum and said, see what that side is like? And it's not that way anymore at all for me. For real. It's one of the reasons I moved. Because I don't believe that there's a hell of a lot of difference between the right and the left anymore. I don't. I think that everybody has so badly lost their way, right? That we need to throw a lot of ones up there. And if you pray to God, fantastic. If you do whatever else, that country needs a hell of a lot of help. The world does. But boy, oh boy, I'm telling you, it's we need help. Clintons and Bushes are the most corrupt and evil people we've had, and best of friends. Makes a lot of sense. But they are best of friends now. They hang out. Calls him his other brother, right? God, helpless, man. By the way, you want to hear something weird? Let me see if I've got a picture of it up here. I don't know that I loaded it. And now I really wish I had. I'll show it to you tomorrow, though. You know, the gentleman, the artist, pretty sure it's a guy, the artist that painted the picture of Bill Clinton in the red dress, it's not the only president he's painted a picture of. He also painted a picture of George Bush sitting on the ground in the Oval Office playing with paper airplanes while there's a bunch of blocks that have been stacked in 2 piles all over the floor. That's the other painting that guy cranked out. When I found that out, the hair on the back of my neck stood out, for real. These are scary times, people, but I'm going to keep talking about them, and I'm going to use all of the right words. I'm not going to censor myself anymore. I have a very intelligent audience, and I feel like it feels filthy. I'm not kidding. It's like I end the show and I want to go take a shower kind of a thing. It's no longer right and left. It's the up and the down. Trust me when I tell you, yep. It's bad. It's really, really bad. I wonder what Bush's picture means. I don't know. Looked a lot like the Twin Towers, and it was frightening to me. It really was. Talk hard. Tara Jackson. Boy, you know what? That'd be a hell of a name for a channel, wouldn't it? Mi gusto, por favor. Thank you. Like it. I met George Bush Jr. and his wife. He was a nice guy. Got his autograph and everything when I was a kid. Yeah, Bill Clinton's a nice guy, right? Everybody that meets him. This is one of the most charismatic guys on earth. You can't meet him and not like him. That's what they say. I think politicians in general are that way, right? It's how they become politicians. Ask them how much a gallon of milk costs, because they haven't gone to the store to buy anything since they became politicians. What made the United States of America great was back in the day, if you look at like the founding fathers, none of them were politicians, right? They were doctors, they were farmers. In fact, they were more farmers than anything else, but they were people that brewed beer. They were goldsmiths, silversmiths, blacksmiths, and they would go and serve, right? And then they would go back and do what they do. But a person that's been in Congress for 30 years, I'm sorry, there's nobody that's been there 30 years that I trust. I don't. The number of people that I met in federal prison who were in there for insider trading, and if you're a politician, you're allowed to do it. How's that? Huh? And you know how easy it is? Think about it. You call your friend. He's on the National Transportation and Safety Board. Or you call another friend. They're on Ways and Means. And they're sitting in meetings, hearing things that are going to wildly affect the stock market. You can bet against this company. You can bet for that company, right? Nancy Pelosi did not go into office with the amount of money that she left office with. I'll tell you that, right? And I'm picking on that side because that's just one of the best stories to come out of that. But trust and believe, it's filthy on both sides. It really is. I think the average age viewer is a bit higher here than usual. Usually, no offense. I feel like I'm a kid here. I'm 26. Jesse, you are a kid here at 26. It's the truth. But I've always had a slightly older audience. That actually hasn't changed much, believe it or not. I've been following that number for a long time, and for whatever reason, I tend to have a slightly higher age of audience. I bet George Bush Jr. walked without his family. Oh, I'm sorry, George Bush Jr. without his family would have been an okay guy, and I hate him. I'm not a fan at all, but just seems really, really dumb. That is why he had my pet goat upside down. Nice. Nice. There's something to that, Tara. There's something to that. All right, people. Thank you for coming here and listening to me. I really appreciate it. And I'll tell you what, I'm glad I got through it. I thought I was going to hurl about 3 minutes before this show started, and I got through it. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a nice sheen of sweat. But at the rate information is coming out on this story, if I didn't tell you this today, you'd probably hear most of it by tomorrow. So I wanted to get here and do it. And I'm honored that you people show up. I really am. It means a lot to me. Between now and the next time I see you, do me a favor and put a little love in your heart. I promise you'll thank me later. Between now and the next time I see you, which will hopefully be tomorrow morning, right? So we can talk about some journaling and some stuff that's actually helps, right? The stuff I talk about at night, a lot of times there's not much solution to. But come by in the morning. I've got solutions. I promise. Between now and then, put a little love in your heart. I love you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Be lady. Love you too. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye. Maybe not. Let's try that again. Good night, everyone.